Maple fusion, sounds of our history. How has music helped shape the past of Lethbridge's streets? Quirky and bold, with a weekend and blend. Pull up the chair, let the tale begin.
Hi, I'm Shelley Kay. Maple Fusion, sounds of our history. Today's story starts with a knock on the door. It was in those mid-50s, just outside of Lethbridge, near Warner, when a traveling salesman arrived at the McNeely household. Well, not with brushes or vacuums, but with records, music books, and an accordion. That chance visit sent young Vern McNeely on a lifelong path of music, jam sessions, and dance halls across southern Alberta. From those first accordion lessons, to playing country and classic rock at weddings and community halls, to Thursday night jams, to Arizona winters with a guitar in hand, Vern's story is about music that follows you, even when life changes around you. He's brought an instrument, I think, for us to see a little bit later, and perhaps even some memorabilia from the 1950s. We'll look at that later with him, because this is a story you do not want to miss. It's about sound, memory, and about how a farmer-turned-musician still makes music matter for himself and for the community around him. Maple Mixers! Before we dive deep, let's have a little fun. Do some Maple Mixers and get to know each other. I'm Shelley Kay, and this is Maple Fusion, sounds of our history. And I'm joined today by
Vern McNeely.
So glad to have you here today, Vern.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure to meet you.
We're going to play a couple of games to get started here before we get into your story. These bells, I am C, you are G. Do you want to give it a whirl and, There you go, they're in tune. All right, this question is for Vern. And it is, Vern, tap your buzzer if you have a snack that you don't like to share. And you got to hit your bell after you say the thing.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
Well, I'm not very good at games anyway.
Oh, it's okay. You're doing fine. So do you have a snack that you just wouldn't share with anyone?
Not really.
No?
I don't think so. No. I like to share.
Oh,
I play well with other kids.
Oh, there you go. Well, I'll tell you, if it were an Eat More chocolate bar, that's mine. I might be convinced, but it's your turn.
Tap your buzzer if you made a silly face in the mirror.
Oh, have I made a silly face? I used to be a professional clown, so I used to make lots of silly, and that was on camera. How about you?
Well, probably.
Probably. There we go.
The child in you never dies, you know.
It doesn't.
You got a choice. The ability to breathe underwater or the ability to jump 20 feet in the air. Which would you choose?
Oh. Well, actually, I love swimming, so I would want to breathe underwater, I think. It might be kind of fun, and I could do a movie, or maybe they've done one about that, I'm not sure. On a long plane ride, your seat partner snores the whole trip, or would you choose on a long plane ride, your seat partner is a crying baby?
Probably the guy that snores.
Maybe, are you that guy?
No.
No. Oh, do you know what? We didn't hit our buzzers. There we go. Okay, let's hit them together. See what music. Look at the music we can make together.
Part of a G chord.
There we go. Exactly. That's right. Now we're going to go between the lines, where the music, the memories, and the meaning of the story unfolds. Vern, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and it was a pleasure to meet you.
It was. We met out in Coaldale.
Yes.
At the museum for the opening, and it was a great day. And you said, I need to know more about that podcast, and here we are.
Well, I don't know how the subject come up because somehow music entered the picture. I think you said you were there singing or doing something involved music, and I said,
right.
I just happened to,
Have a
you always
story.
pat your own back a little bit, so I kind of just said, well, I'm interested in music. And then somehow I decided to tell a story about how I became involved in
You did.
music.
You did. And so if I can take us back in time to around, I think you said 1955-ish, do you remember where you were, what was going on, and at the time when the traveling salesman knocked on your door? Can you take us back to that time?
I'm pretty sure I was about 11 years old. And somebody come beating on the door, and Dad answered the door. And for some reason, my dad decided to listen to what he was trying to sell. And he said he was selling these accordion courses. And how they worked was you got a record player, a 12-bass accordion, and a music book, and an album of records. This course led us to starting out with lessons. And then part of the lesson program was that once a month, you got a visit from a teacher. And his name was Harry Bailey, and he was pretty popular around Lethbridge. So Harry did quite a bit. He was a piano player, and he did quite a bit of that kind of stuff around Lethbridge. There's quite a few people probably remember him if they're.
And did he actually give you any hands-on lessons?
Well, I
or
don't.
was it more just the?
I'm not sure that he just didn't give us some theory.
Okay.
And of course, there was a very good theory section in the first 2 pages of the book. And then it went along, and the first lesson was some simple 2-line musical thing, and you could play with it with the record, or you could listen to it, try and copy it. And so you just kept progressing, and it got, I can remember some of the songs were more and still more and more yet, You kind of had to discipline yourself even at 11 years old, because you had to look at this, do I really want to play this silly stuff,
So how actually did those early lessons work? You mentioned the first couple of pages, there was theory, and then what did you do? Did you get like a song a month, or did you get theory and a song? And then he came back and he checked on a paper. Did you have to record? How did it work?
He kind of had a goal set that this is where you should be next time I come around.
Did your parents set up a rehearsal or practice schedule for you?
Well, it was an after-school deal. I don't know that we were restricted from not doing something else first, or, I do know we worked at it reasonably hard.
Your parents were farming?
Yes.
And what type of farming? Was it mixed?
Dryland farming.
Dryland. And were you as a child, or as an 11-year-old, what was your role around the farm?
Just to be there. I loved every minute of it.
Did you?
I would ride my bike through a loose dirt field to ride with my dad or the hired man. We sat on the battery box of the D2 Cat, and if safety people saw what we did in them days, they'd all die of heart. They'd come right apart at the seams because, there was nothing safe about it,
Right.
So, but I loved every minute of that farm.
And how many acres did your parents
Well, we
have?
were farming about 800 at that time. Then some of it we downsized. Anyway, then Dad ended up with 380 acres. And when he passed away, I took it over and I farmed it. And I farmed till 1998.
Goodness.
And then I decided that I didn't have to do that to be happy anymore.
And that was all dry land?
Yeah.
How did you fit music then in with farming? So if you enjoyed being out there farming, but you enjoyed music. Did you find it was an easy mix or an easy way to step aside and have something else happening in your life, like the music?
Well, I was always interested in mechanical stuff. I had some wonderful toys growing up. I got a chance to be a kid and use my imagination. I wasn't terribly interested in sports, but I always kind of figured that was one of the things that I was going to learn, and I took it pretty serious. Part of the family, I have a cousin that started in the music lessons with an accordion a little bit before I did. And I probably never quite achieved what he did, but I got reasonably advanced I was into grade 3, grade 4 music type of song.
Your parents, did they play music? So other than your cousin, did your parents or anyone else in your family play music?
No. They both loved music. My dad and mom liked to dance quite a bit. But I never heard either one of them sing.
So if your parents danced, because it isn't always about playing an instrument, it can be from your love and joy of listening to the radio, listening to your records, or dancing. And so these opportunities, and that's what this podcast is finding out how people have music in their lives. Sometimes they don't even realize how musical their family is. So now let's kind of pull this back and let's go to that 2-year mark. So as you went along, your music lessons were, this package that we're going to see later is 2 years worth of music, and he came out every month and checked on you and did your thing, and you moved along. Well, what happened as that progressed? Was he there every month regularly, or?
I was really close to being finished, the book. Like, I'd done the last lessons, and we waited and wondering when this guy was going to show up. So anyway, we come to Lethbridge about once every 6 weeks. Anyway, we knew where the address of the store was, and it was on 3rd Avenue by the Club Cigar store, and there was always vacuum cleaner salesmen in this store. Well, anyway, we went there a couple times, I think, through the lesson time. But the last time we went there to see when the teacher was coming and where this thing was going to take us when we finished the book. Well, there was nobody in the store. They'd disappeared. They'd left Lethbridge. So that left us hanging. So then my dad looked around and he found a lady in Milk River. She was a piano player and a music teacher. And she played accordion part-time. And she taught me very well. And she was the one that got me into grade 3, grade 4 type of classical music. It's semi-classical music. And old time, I played lots of old time music,
So after taking these additional couple of years of music on accordion, how did you get to that guitar, and did you do music in school? And how did this journey then continue into other instruments? And what other instruments?
The guitar actually came first, and I didn't work too hard at it. The guitar was really hard to play and hurt your fingers really bad, which I sometimes wonder how I persevered on that. And we loved that Wilf Carter music and Gene Autry music and all them old-time cowboy singers, But anyway, then along in about 57 or 58, we'd already started the music lessons, and then with the other lady, and got a better accordion, which came from the, if you want to know, the Pruger musical store. Anyway, I joined the school band and played the drums in the school band, and we had these joint concerts. And after the second joint concert, well, then the Milk River bandmaster asked me if I would play with him too. But anyway, then the Milk River band, I was in 3 Calgary Stampede parades with the Milk River band. So
that was the day and age of good parades, wasn't it?
Music opened the door unlocked a lot of doors for me that would have never opened any other way. I met dozens of fabulous people. Sometimes we had so much fun that you kind of got felt guilty about getting paid for it. You know?
But you still took
But
the
it was,
pay, right?
you know, and we had some really neat experiences, you know.
Tell me about where you went and played.
Well, we played in Lethbridge a lot. I'm thinking it was once a month, and it might have been twice a month. They had a dance hall in the Elks Club, and it was some really interesting experience happened there too. The accordion player fell through a window one night when we were packing in.
Whoa, you were wild boys.
Well, they were renovating, and they come down the steps, and they changed the way the entryway was, and he slipped on the bottom step and fell through the window.
Oh my goodness.
And he's falling, and I'm seeing all these big long pieces of glass hanging down.
Oh.
And he went to the hospital, and they picked 4 pieces of glass out of his back.
Wow.
And he was late. We thumbed it without him for the first half hour, 45 minutes of the dance. I sang and picked my guitar. I kind of got away from reading music. I took a course to how to play by ear. And so then I started working a little more on that. I thought, well, I had to get my $25 back that I paid this guy to take this course. So as a result, that's where I could sit at a campfire for an hour or two and
just
never get a music book out.
And what do you enjoy? So as a musician, often, as you know, people play music that they have to read notes. They have to, or they can't play. Or people say, oh, I only play by ear, and so if there's music, I can't help you. I can't play. What do you feel is, for you, what do you enjoy doing?
I've played with lots of people that play by ear, and some of it almost makes your ears bleed. But, you know, they're having fun. They love music enough to bare their soul and stand up in front of 50 people in an RV park. So you got to admire their courage and admire how far, and some of them never read a note in their life. And I spent hours learning chords. All chords are based on the 7 notes in the scale. You probably know that. You know,
maybe.
You know, if you're going to play a minor chord, you got to flat the 3rd note.
Right.
You know, that stuff. So, you know.
And you would have learned that in your lessons.
Well, I learned it in the lessons, and then I had that old neighbor of mine that played the saxophone, and he played the saxophone at his 91st birthday party. And him and I would sit, and I'd go to his place, and he had this piano bench. He'd sit on the end of it with his guitar, and he had the piano on his right hand. And we'd be going through music, and he'd say, well, how do we do that chord? And you know that there's a dozen inversions for every chord, you know. And so we'd work with it. So we'd find the C chord that if we needed middle C or high C, we played a different chord.
Right.
And so we played chords all over the neck of the guitar.
And that's the best way to play.
And so then, he'd analyze them chords on the piano. One night I went out there, you know, and I think he'd been torturing his guitar all afternoon, you know. I walked in and he said, McNeely, they should have called this thing the Devil's Harp. And I said, why? And he says, some days it just drives me crazy.
Do you know, it's interesting. We interviewed someone recently, and their family, they were talking about a fiddle. And it was banned from the house because someone said it was the devil's instrument. Uh-huh. Yeah, and it's the noise and learning. You mentioned Kruger's Music, and you mentioned your cousin, and he worked at Kruger's Music in Lethbridge, did he?
He worked for him right out of high school, and then he did teach guitar for him as well. And him and I are back playing together again. We used to play together quite a bit, and then of course, family got in the way and work got in the way. So, you know, I always said it's not hard to keep a lazy man busy, and I proved it. So.
And your family, your children, do you have?
Well, our one daughter took music lessons, and she took piano lessons, and she was a really great piano player, and she had that ability to know what the composer was thinking. And if you played enough music to know, you know, you have to put the soft parts in and the loud parts, you have to do like Willie Nelson and make people wait for that note sometimes.
Well, if you know that about Willie Nelson, you know music, because that's so many people miss that about his music. And he has so many nuances in the way of him playing.
Another one with Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yes. And these are a lot of musicians that people nowadays don't know about or don't hear or don't even appreciate the music of, but their talent is extraordinary. And today, a lot of people could learn that. You know, I heard somebody playing music the other night, and they were just playing notes. And then the next group got up, and they were playing music. And the difference there is just what you're saying. A person can play notes, but until you put that feeling into the music, you aren't playing music.
See, and I look at the mechanics of music, and I also look at the mechanics of a musical instrument. And a guitar is one of them. You can tune it 3 or 4 different ways and still play it well. You know, and you look at what some guy did when he hung 6 strings on a board and put frets on it.
Right.
And, you know, like C, for instance, it's in 99 places. Well, that's exaggeration, but it's in a lot of places, you know. And I don't know how much you've messed with the guitar. I think you have, because there's a couple in the background here, you know.
Just 1 or 2. Sugar and facts. And now it's time for a little sugar and facts trivia treat to keep your brain dancing. Well, Little Leaf, our trivia for today. In the mid-1950s, traveling salesmen visited rural Alberta homes all across Alberta, selling musical instruments and lessons. Which company started this trend, known for sending musical salesmen to rural areas? And what decade did this occur in? It was only 1 decade. Was it the Oahu Music Company, Sears and Roebuck and Company, Alberta Music Supply, Canadian Tire Music Division? Vern, do you know?
No.
Okay.
None of the above.
Well, I've got the answer for you. It was the Oahu Music Company. Seriously. They started selling Hawaiian instruments with the lessons. And the decade was the 1950s, and then they were done. So music has taken you so many different places, as you said. And you've collected instruments, you've got your original books still. So if you were to say there's one song, let's go with that is my favorite song, what would that song be?
I love that Alpine music. I also love a lot of Strauss music. Probably Blue Danube or Vienna, Life in the Vienna Woods.
Interesting. Okay, so here's my next question. If you were to describe your life in music, how would you describe it?
Well, you know, like I said earlier, that Wilf Carter and Gene Autry and Roy Rogers, them country singers. And a lot of the music I'm involved in now is I'm learned it in the middle of the last century. And so, and country music was always part of our life. And old-time music. You know, old-time, and all that old music involved guitars and accordions. And fiddles, or violins, or whatever.
So would that be what you'd describe as that music then would be your life?
It was, you know, and it's in my head, right. You know. But, you know, I always appreciate the talent side of music as well. And I understand how hard people have to work to achieve that goal. My cousin brought it up the other day, and then I heard it on YouTube or something. I think a guy was playing with Glenn Campbell. Glenn Campbell told the story of some guy walking down the street in New York ask, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? And Glenn Campbell says, practice, practice, practice.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? Oh my goodness.
So you see, and this is what I feel about music lessons now, that the discipline isn't there as much. We're kind of getting a culture where you can't fail, so we don't make you hit that goal.
Right.
You know?
And kids also, they want instant gratification.
Yes.
It's the cell phone and technology. I'm going to text you and I expect you to text me right back. So it's learning of music. There's a frustration that why am I not picking this up? And I know from teaching music, I always start out in the first lesson, I always somewhere say, what are the 3 things you need to remember about music? Practice, practice, and practice. And that is the hardest piece, isn't it? And so if someone who couldn't see your story, but they could only hear your story, so they couldn't hear the words behind it, what sound would you want them to hear?
That's enough. You're coming up with some tough stuff.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, you know what?
But
It could be
think-
a tractor. It could be a tractor.
You know, there's all kinds of sound. You know, a nice sounding diesel engine is music to my ears too.
There you go.
The first sound that I think maybe anybody should hear is a voice, a nice voice. You know, from the music side, I would say something that blended together. When I'm tuning my guitar and starting it out, sometimes I'll just play 2, 3 strings, and I just mess around and I'll make up a little series of chords, and how one will run into the other, you know. So that's
And all of a sudden you've got something magical.
And I never ever composed any music. One song I changed one verse. I took a Merle Haggard song, and I did it for our daughter's wedding.
Oh.
And I changed one verse, because if you know the song The Farmer's Daughter,
Yes. Oh.
then
my
I
goodness.
changed the second verse because it didn't kind of fit our family situation.
Oh.
And I worked really hard. I worked on that I made up my mind to do it, and then I asked my daughter if it was okay to do it. And so then she said, she gave me permission. So then I worked on it, and I worked on it for probably 2 weeks to get it to where I wanted to go.
Well, and sometimes music can evoke emotions that words simply cannot.
Well, I can lose tears real easy with music.
And I think that's the part of music that is that international language, because you can hear emotion.
You might have
Without
seen
words.
You might have seen that when I was trying to explain that song.
Right. Absolutely. Is there anything right now that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share?
You might want to ask how I found the time or something sometime.
Okay, how did you? There
Well,
you
I don't
go.
know.
How
I don't
did you?
know.
How did you find the
Well,
time?
sometimes, you know, it's a matter of there's 2 times you use, sometimes you hide yourself in music. Sometimes you use it as an outlet. And like I say, music's in my head a lot. I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll have a song and I'll work on it for hours, you know.
Something you may have heard
Well,
during
it's
the
something
day.
or it'll just all of a sudden, that song will be in my head. Like I woke up this morning thinking of Cold, Cold Heart, Hank Williams song, you know.
I don't have a cold, cold heart.
No,
I promise.
I know. And you know, it's a well-written piece of music. Music can express love and hate quite well. You know, you asked me a lot of questions that dug way back. Once you get it started, it sort of falls
It
out.
flows, doesn't it? Well, music, I think we've all heard stories as performers where we go into particularly an area where there might be medical challenges, whether it be children, but especially seniors and seniors that haven't spoken for 2 years. And we'll play a song that evokes a memory for them. And I vividly remember 2 of where one gentleman, they didn't even think he had the ability to speak anymore, and he just started singing. Mm-hmm. It just, I've got goosebumps as I say it. And we all have those stories that we see the power of music. And so I would like to thank you so much for joining us today, because your story is so unique. I didn't even know myself before meeting you that there was such a thing as a traveling salesman that brought music lessons to your door, let alone then we find out there in the decade of the 1950s, there were a lot of them.
Well, I guess, you got to look at what controls the way the world operates.
Right.
And something brought that guy to our doorstep, just like something you and I met at the unusualest, craziest places that, the only reason you were there was because of music. I was there because my grandson wanted to see the blacksmith.
Right.
And we were in the blacksmith shop when we started talking.
Well, and I was in the blacksmith shop with a puppet on my hand, because the puppet wanted to see it too. Okay. I just thought I should mention that.
Okay. Well, you know what? Being that you talk with a puppet, well, you never act your age.
Well, I never want to grow up. I never do, and I don't think you do either. Oh, golly. Bringing it in. Let's switch gears and see what our guest brought in to share about their part of history. All right, so we are back with Bringing It In with Vern McNeely. We have got some absolute treasures that this gentleman has brought for us to see. Vern, this looks seriously like a treasure. And as you were talking about the course that your dad let the man into your house to buy, a book, records, and an accordion. This is the original book that he would have purchased for you and your sister to learn from. And then you followed the lesson and played the record. Is that correct?
And you could play with the record, or you guess it'd give you an ear lesson that you'd say, well, I heard this on the record. I'm going to try and duplicate it on the accordion.
This looks like a book, but Vern, you pointed out to me, it says Centennial College of Music, Lethbridge, Alberta. And that sticker was on there.
That must have been what they managed to buy their business license with or something.
Okay.
But they did, they got their heels cooled out and headed out of the country by the time we got the book finished.
And so this is the Vavro method of home instruction music course. And if we open this up, so these records, perhaps could you take one of those out for us to take a look at, Vern? And so that is what type of record?
33 RPM.
There we go.
Which is what all long plays are now, all vinyl records.
Okay.
Or not all of them, but the other two, the 45 and the 78, went obsolete pretty well.
And so when you got these records, you were with 78 records, and this was kind of a new format?
Well, yes, because we didn't have a player that actually played these, but we did get a small player with the lessons. With their lessons.
That sounds like a pretty premium deal.
Well, it was, and I can't remember how much Dad paid for it. I remember how much he paid for my first accordion.
Do you mind sharing that with us?
$375 in 1957.
Wow.
Which would be probably, I'm guessing, $8,000, $7,500 a day.
It comes back to that saying of, we're not necessarily rich in money, but we're rich in what we have. And I can imagine the scraping that your parents would have had to do to put out that kind of money for something like this.
He only had enough. There was times when I don't think he had a lot of money in his pocket. And one of my mothers was saying, Vernon, you're never going to learn any younger.
There we go. Okay, let's take a look inside this book here. And this says that this self-teaching music course for the entire family is produced on records. And so the Vabro method, now, does that look like the young you, Vern?
Well, probably a similar haircut.
There we are. And so if we could just take a look through, oh my goodness, look at all these recordings, 26 of them. And this is the first waltz. Well, that wasn't many pages, and you're already playing a waltz?
Well,
Wow.
I guess you moved along pretty fast. You know, I haven't probably looked at that thing for, I don't know.
I just noticed something. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just noticed you
we
have
did get
all of
stars.
you got stars. Oh, weren't they the best?
Well, I guess they were, yeah.
This is magic, and I would like to actually read this, if I may. It says, this picture, which will show all the viewers, is the cast of a typical all-Vavro review conducted annually for the enjoyment of the 4-H club members who attended the great junior livestock shows in St. Paul, Minnesota. These yearly and Vavro extravaganzas are all but one of the many Vavro student performances. Oh my goodness. Did you ever go to Minnesota?
No.
No. Well, we'll have to show a picture.
You
of
know,
that.
they left Lethbridge long before they have achieved. And you know, in a way, it kind of gives door-to-door salesmen a bad name. But some were judging if this is this either sales hype or is it actual, you know.
Well, I would say if it's a picture, it probably is
It is a picture that probably did happen in places where they had the market,
right.
you know.
But in Warner, they probably
And I
could
don't-
not do an extravaganza.
And I don't think I ever heard of anybody else in town that bought into that.
Bought
thing.
into it. Well, it sounds like a wonderful thing. And that takes us to your guitar. Would you mind showing us your guitar?
Oh, certainly.
Well, this is quite the instrument. My gosh, it's beautiful. Tell us about it.
Well, it's a Yamaha. When the Yamaha was making most of their guitars in Japan, this guitar was built, as near as I can tell, in the early 70s. And I just fell in love with it. And I've played it probably more than any of them. And it just, listen to it.
Oh, beautiful tone. That's beautiful. I want to end our episode today here in Lethbridge with Vern McNeely. This has been a delight and a learning experience for myself, and I'm sure for you folks as well. I'm Shelley Kay with Maple Fusion, and I'm signing off today with
Vern McNeely. Thank you very much, Shelley, for inviting me.
Vern McNeely's journey reminds us that sometimes the most unexpected visitors can open the door to a lifetime of rhythm and connections. From farm fields to wedding dances, from that first accordion to guitars, Vern's story plays out like a country waltz across southern Alberta, full of warmth, grit, and joy. Thank you for joining us today, Vern, and thank you to everyone who has joined us. And if you're lucky enough to hear him strumming at a music jam, pull up a chair. You're hearing history in real time.
Maple Fusion.